Have you ever set a massive goal, meticulously planned it out, fought tooth and nail for months or maybe even years, finally achieved it, and then
Just feel totally empty.
exactly, you feel completely empty. You're just standing there at the summit of this mountain you built, looking around and thinking, is this it? Is this really what I exhausted myself for?
Yeah, it's a remarkably common experience.
Or, maybe you've been on the completely opposite side of that spectrum. You felt the crushing frustration of a perfectly crafted, color-coded 5-year plan collapsing in exactly 5 days.
Because life threw a curveball.
Right. A shift in the economy, a sudden family emergency, or honestly, just a Tuesday that didn't go your way.
We have all been there. It is a profoundly universal human experience to feel betrayed by our own ambitions.
It really is. And usually when that happens, we operate like users of a computer system.
We react. We try to patch the bugs, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. We try to download a new motivational app into our brains, or we read another generic self-help book hoping for a quick software update. But today, we're doing something entirely different.
We are stepping out of the user seat. We are becoming the architects of our own operating system.
That is the pivotal transition, moving from simply reacting to the world to actually, designing your interaction with it.
Which brings us to the mission of today's deep dive. We are jumping into a massive stack of source material, focused specifically on what's called the architecture of becoming.
And what's fascinating here is that these materials completely shift the paradigm of personal growth. We're moving away from the theoretical feel-good space of simply learning about transformation.
And stepping into the rigorous structural space of actually living it.
Yes, we are exploring the mathematical and structural blueprints that govern human transformation. It's about understanding that your life isn't just a series of random events. It's a structure you are actively building.
Whether you realize it or not. Okay, let's unpack this. Because when I first started looking through these sources, I saw chapters like the mathematics of life architecture and the architecture of transformation.
Seems a bit intimidating, right?
Oh, absolutely. I have to admit, it sounded incredibly dense. It sounded like we were going to be doing algebra to figure out our feelings.
Which is usually a recipe for a headache.
Right. But the mission of this deep dive is to show you exactly why this is actually the most liberating practical framework you might ever encounter. It takes the mystery out of why we fail and why we succeed.
It's liberating precisely because it provides structure. Transformation isn't this mystical, random event that just strikes you like lightning if you meditate hard enough.
Or if you recite enough daily affirmations in the mirror.
Exactly. It has a rigorous, mappable, almost mathematical architecture. By understanding this architecture, you transition from being an unconscious participant in your own life.
Bouncing around like a pinball.
Right, bouncing off of every obstacle. You transition from that to becoming the conscious designer of your reality. You finally hold the blueprint.
So you can look at your life and say, this wall is crumbling because the foundation over here is weak.
Precisely. But to understand that blueprint, we have to start by completely tearing down a concept that the self-help industry has worshipped for decades.
Which brings us to section 1 of our deep dive.
Yeah.
We have to fundamentally redefine the journey. We have to dismantle the illusion of goals.
We really do. The traditional obsession with goals is actually where most people stumble and ultimately fail.
Because we are conditioned to think that a goal is the engine of our progress. But the framework introduces a 3-tiered structure: goals, targets, and orientation.
Let's break those down. The framework defines a goal simply as an endpoint. It's a destination. It answers the question, what do you want to have or become?
Like, do you want to be a millionaire? Do you want to run a marathon? Do you want to write a novel?
Exactly. Those are goals. But the critical insight here, the shift that changes absolutely everything about how you operate daily, is realizing that a goal is merely the emergent result of effort.
It is not the engine that gets you there.
No, a goal does not do any work.
Man, that is such a hard pill to swallow. Because every corporate retreat, every performance review, every motivational speaker says, set smart goals.
Oh, I know. It's ingrained in us.
But the material makes this incredibly sharp point. Goals themselves do not propel you forward. They are endpoints that await your arrival, offering absolutely zero guidance on the actual journey.
Think about it like a ship.
Yeah, the ship analogy. If you are in the middle of a massive storm on the ocean, knowing the name of the port you want to reach does not help you steer the ship.
Not at all. Yelling, I want to reach New York at the waves doesn't stop the ship from sinking.
It just makes you a loud person on a sinking ship. Knowing the destination provides context, but it provides zero operational utility in the moment of crisis.
Which brings us to the second tier, which is targets. If the goal is the destination, the Port of New York, the target is the directional heading.
It's the compass bearing, say, due northwest.
Right. A target acts as the bridge between your daily microscopic actions and that ultimate macroscopic destination. It gives you a consistent line to follow when you can't see the port.
Which, let's be honest, is most of the time. But even a compass bearing isn't enough on its own.
No, because you can stare at a compass all day and the ship still won't move correctly if the waves are pushing you around.
Which brings us to the deepest, most foundational tier of this whole concept, orientation.
This is the core of it. The source describes orientation as continuous differential moments of adjustment.
For the calculus fans out there, the text actually uses the mathematical term dt.
Ah, yes, the instantaneous rate of change. It's the active, daily, even second-by-second translation of the abstract target into concrete behaviors.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, orientation is the most vital mechanism you possess for preventing drift.
It is. Most people fail because they fixate intensely on the goal. They build a vision board. They might occasionally check their target to see if they're generally heading in the right direction.
But they completely ignore their orientation. They ignore the micro adjustments required in the present moment.
I really want to lean into this ship analogy again because it crystallizes the concept beautifully. The goal is the specific port. The target is your compass heading. But orientation
is the physical act of standing at the helm. It's feeling the resistance of the heavy wooden wheel in your hands.
Yes, it's turning that wheel slightly left to counteract a sudden, strong crosswind. It's turning it slightly right when the current tries to pull you off course.
The wheel is never set once and forgotten. You don't just lock it in place and go take a nap.
Exactly. You are constantly actively adjusting in real time.
But I have to push back here on the standard advice we've all been fed. If goals offer zero actual guidance on the daily journey, why do we hear so much about crushing your goals?
Well, because goals are highly visible and they're easily communicable. They make for great headlines.
True. It is very easy to sell someone a system on how to make $1 million.
It's a highly marketable goal. It is much harder to sell someone a system on how to constantly orient your behavior through thousands of tedious micro adjustments over the next 5 years.
Yeah, that doesn't fit on a bumper sticker.
Yeah.
Goals are static, and human beings love static, easily defined things.
But life is wildly dynamic. Life is the storm. The framework we are exploring reveals a recursive, almost backward essence to these three words.
How so?
Though we usually say them in the order of goals, targets, orientation, you actually have to read them and live them in reverse.
So orientation leads to targets, which leads to goals.
Precisely. You don't set a goal, aim at it, then act. That is the old broken model that leads to the emptiness you mentioned at the start. The new architecture says cultivate your orientation first. By practicing daily behavioral alignment, by constantly adjusting the wheel, you naturally define and solidify your target.
And by sustaining that target over time, your goal generates itself. It emerges as a natural byproduct.
Which raises an important question for you listening right now. Tomorrow morning when you wake up, do you ask yourself, what is my goal today?
And this framework suggests that is the wrong question entirely. It sets you up for failure because you can't achieve the long-term goal today.
The right question, the only practically useful question is, am I orienting toward my target today? Am I adjusting the wheel?
It's the concept of a point within a point. It's like a set of nesting dolls. On the surface, the outer doll, you want to achieve the goal.
But beneath that, at a deeper level, you're trying to sustain the target.
And at the absolute deepest atomic foundation, the tiny doll in the very center, you're trying to master orientation.
There's this incredibly profound idea in the material. It says, many pursue goals, effective individuals maintain targets, masters embody orientation.
Wow. When you master orientation, you stop chasing goals altogether. You don't have to. The goals actually emerge naturally and pursue you.
Because if you're constantly steering true north, you're inevitably going to hit land. You don't have to force the land to appear.
It is a profound paradigm shift. And what it really does is take the crushing anxiety out of achievement.
You're no longer desperately reaching for a static endpoint that constantly feels out of reach. You're simply maintaining your alignment in the present moment.
Did I orient correctly in the last hour? Yes. Great. I am successful right now.
But that brings us to a critical juncture. We need a way to measure that alignment.
Right, because if orientation is a continuous practice, how do we know if it's actually working? How do we know we aren't just spinning the wheel wildly?
Exactly. Here's where it gets really interesting and where we move from the philosophy of aiming into the actual pseudo-algebraic mathematics of human achievement.
Section 2. The sources don't just give us poetic metaphors about ships and storms. They give us an integrated equation, literally an algebra equation for human achievement.
And I know, when I first saw an equation trying to explain human ambition, I balked.
Oh, same. It sounds clinical at first. It sounds like we were reducing the human spirit to a spreadsheet.
But it's actually an incredibly powerful diagnostic tool.
Okay, lay it on us. What is the equation?
The equation presented for achievement is this. Achievement equals, open curly bracket, orientation with an arrow pointing from target to goal multiplied by consistency, close curly bracket.
Okay,
And then that entire top section is divided by resistance.
let me break that down and write it out mentally for everyone listening, because visualizing this fraction is key to understanding your entire life.
It really is.
Imagine a fraction. On the top half of the line, the numerator, you have your forward momentum. It reads orientation with a little arrow pointing from target to goal times consistency.
Let's deconstruct that top half first. What does that little arrow actually mean?
Yeah, tell me about the arrow.
That specific notation, orientation with the target arrow goal, encapsulates directionality. It means your current active practice is deliberately aligning your daily behaviors with your directional heading in pursuit of the desired outcome.
So it's not just random action.
Right. Busyness is not orientation. You can be incredibly busy running in circles on the deck of the ship, but if you aren't turning the wheel toward the compass heading, your orientation is zero.
It has to be vectored action. Okay, so you have your vectored action.
Yeah.
You are doing the right things, pointing the right way. And then we multiply that by the second part of the numerator.
Consistency.
Consistency. This is the compounding multiplier. And this is where the math gets ruthlessly honest.
It really does, because if you have a perfect day of orientation, you eat perfectly, you write 10 pages of your novel, you're perfectly present with your kids.
But your consistency over the month is basically a 1 out of 30.
Exactly. The math says your achievement is negligible. It doesn't move the needle. You multiply by 1, you don't get very far.
But sustained orientation, multiplying by 90 days, 300 days, that creates transformative leverage. The math compounds.
Which brings us to the bottom half of the fraction, the denominator, resistance.
You are dividing your total effort by the friction that moderates your achievement.
And this is where most people completely misunderstand why they're failing. They think they just need more momentum on top.
They think they just need to try harder, more orientation, more consistency.
But often, the problem is that the resistance denominator on the bottom is massive. This friction comes in 3 distinct forms.
Let's hear them.
First, environmental constraints. Do you have limited financial resources? Are you starved for time because you work 3 jobs? Do you lack a supportive community?
Let's pause on environmental constraints for a second, because this is huge. If you're trying to orient toward becoming a master chef, but your environmental resistance is that you only have a microwave and a budget of $10 a day for food.
Your denominator is gigantic.
Right. You can have perfect orientation and perfect consistency on the top of the fraction, but you are dividing it by a massive number. Your achievement will be slow.
It's not because you're a bad cook. It's because the math of your environment is working against you.
Wow. Okay, what's the second form?
The second form of resistance is internal obstacles. This is the psychological friction.
Like battling chronic low motivation.
Yes, or having unresolved trauma that causes self-sabotage. Do you suffer from a lack of clarity or imposter syndrome?
So if you sit down to write that novel and your internal resistance is screaming that you are a fraud, you are spending half your energy just fighting the denominator instead of adding to the numerator.
Precisely. And the third form is systemic friction.
Systemic friction, what does that look like?
Are your feedback loops broken? Is there a lack of accountability in your environment? Are you using tools that constantly break down?
Oh, like trying to learn a new language using a textbook that is 50 years out of date.
Exactly. Systemic friction is when the very processes you rely on are actively slowing you down.
So mathematically speaking, lowering your resistance denominator actually amplifies your achievement for the exact same amount of effort.
That's the beauty of it. If you keep your orientation and consistency exactly the same, but you remove a toxic friend from your environment, or you finally upgrade your slow computer, your resistance drops.
And your total achievement spikes. But I still have to ask, why map it this way? Why use algebra to map our ambitions and our deeply personal struggles? Doesn't reducing human transformation to variables and operators make life feel a bit robotic, a bit cold?
That is a very common initial reaction. It feels reductive. But what this framework argues is that this math doesn't make life robotic, it makes it debuggable.
Debuggable, I like that word.
Think about how we normally handle failure. If you are failing to achieve something you desperately want and you're operating without this framework, it usually leads to immense shame.
You look at your lack of progress and you internalize it. You think, I'm just lazy, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm just not meant for this kind of success.
You view the failure as a fundamental character flaw.
Right, you have a bad week and you just say, I feel bad today, I guess I'm a broken person, I'll just give up.
The emotion takes over. But if we connect this to the bigger picture of the equation, it gives you an objective soundboard with actual turnable knobs.
You look at the math instead of looking at your ego.
You ask yourself, why am I failing? Well, look at the equation. Is your consistency variable sitting at 0 because you're only trying once a week? Okay, that's a knob you can turn.
Is your resistance denominator too high because you are trying to build a new healthy habit in a highly toxic environment filled with junk food? That's another knob.
By identifying the specific mathematical variable that is failing, you entirely remove the shame. You replace emotional self-flagellation with architectural troubleshooting.
You are not a bad person. You just have a math problem to solve.
Yeah.
It formalizes what used to just be vague intuition. It takes the emotion out of the audit.
It's incredibly freeing.
And I want to point out a tiny but crucial detail in the equation: the curly brackets. The source material specifically notes that the curly brackets surrounding the numerator symbolize a dynamic, evolving system.
They contain a hidden reorientation protocol.
Meaning, this equation isn't a rigid cage you lock yourself into. It inherently recognizes that you need to know when to persist on a chosen path and when to recalibrate your direction because you detect drift.
You are allowed to adjust the variables. You aren't supposed to just blindly grind away if the target changes.
It's all about continuous feedback. If the resistance is too high, you don't just blindly push harder and burn yourself out. You alter the environment to lower the denominator.
If your orientation feels increasingly misaligned with who you are becoming, you engage the reorientation protocol. You steer the ship slightly.
It fundamentally shifts you from being a victim of your circumstances to a mechanic, an architect of your own life system.
So Chapter Q gives us the math of achievement. It gives us the engine that drives us forward and the variables we can tweak to optimize that engine.
But that naturally begs the question, what exactly are we orienting toward? What does the finished structure look like?
Because if we just blindly push forward with a powerful engine, we might build a sturdy house that we absolutely hate living in.
Right. We have the engine, but what is the blueprint of the vehicle itself? This transitions us to Section 3, moving into Chapter R, where we explore a spatial hierarchical visualization known as the root square chart.
The root square chart is how you make the invisible architecture of your becoming actually visible.
Most people view personal transformation as a strictly linear A to B march. They think, I am here at point A, I will take 10 sequential steps, and I will arrive at point B.
And the root square chart completely shatters that illusion. It demonstrates that true transformation is not a straight line, it is a multidimensional synthesis.
You are building a complex structure. Visually, imagine a perfect square divided into interconnected hierarchical levels radiating from the center outward.
Let's walk through the anatomy of this chart because visualizing it is key. Let's start from the center and move outward.
Okay, level 1 is the root. This sits at the very dead center of the square and represents 100% of the value of what you are trying to become.
But the text makes a fascinating point. The center square appears empty at first.
Yes, the root represents the emergent whole. It is the complete integrated outcome you are building toward.
The reason it appears empty at first and why you shouldn't panic that it's empty is because it cannot be forced or directly acted upon.
You cannot just decide to be the root. It's the natural, spontaneous byproduct of the surrounding structures you're going to build.
The material notes the root is both a noun and a verb.
Let's use a relatable example to track through this whole chart. Let's say your root is becoming a master chef. That's the noun.
But it's also cooking at a masterful level, which is the verb. It is a state of being and becoming all at once.
But I remember looking at this and thinking, wait, if the root is 100% of the value, and it's the main thing I want to achieve, how can it be empty? Are we just supposed to ignore the main thing we want?
You don't ignore it, but you realize you cannot build it directly. You don't build the root by staring at the center of the chart and wishing really hard. That leads to paralysis.
You build the surrounding layers. Branching immediately outward from the root, we have level 2, the 4 branches.
Each branch represents exactly 25% of the total value of the root. These are the fundamental capability areas, the core load-bearing walls of your transformation.
So in our Master Chef example, the 4 branches might be 1. Culinary technique, 2. Flavor profiling, 3. Kitchen leadership, and 4. Ingredient sourcing.
Those are massive fundamental pillars. And the rule is, if you ignore one of these branches, the root collapses under the stress. You become completely lopsided.
Right. If you have perfect technique but 0 kitchen leadership, your restaurant fails. You aren't a master chef.
Correct. But even a branch is too big to tackle in a single day. You can't just wake up and say, I'm going to master culinary technique today.
So we move further out toward the edges of the square. Level 3. The 12 leaves.
There are 3 leaves per branch, making up about 8.33% of the total value each.
The leaves are the functional states. The framework calls them the living tissue of the architecture. They are the operational capacities that act as the bridge connecting your micro-level effort to the macro-level transformation of the branches.
So looking at the branch of culinary technique, the 3 leaves might be knife skills, temperature control, and plating aesthetics.
These are more specific, but there's still functional states, not single actions. Which finally brings us to the absolute outer edge of the chart, level 4.
The 36 fruits.
There are 3 fruits per leaf, representing roughly 2.78% of the total value each. These are the atomic, highly actionable microelements.
This granularity is vital to the entire system. The fruits are where your daily orientation, that continuous adjustment of the wheel we talked about, actually happens.
They are the smallest measurable units of behavior. I really want to emphasize this granularity for you listening because this is where most goal setting fails. A fruit is not some vague, fluffy aspiration.
Improve my knife skills is a leaf, not a fruit. It's too ambiguous to execute on a Tuesday at 2 p.m.
Exactly. A fruit is an atomic, objectively observable action. Julienne an onion perfectly in under 45 seconds. That is a fruit.
Memorize the internal cooking temperatures of 5 different proteins. That is a fruit.
It is the cellular construction of a new identity. If a third-party observer cannot look at you and definitively say, yes, they did that, or no, they didn't, it's not a fruit.
And this brings us to the core mechanism of how the architecture of becoming actually works. This is where the magic of the root square chart happens.
What's fascinating here is the introduction of a specific mathematical symbol, the synthesis operator.
It looks like a plus sign inside a circle. The formula is fruit synthesis, fruit leads to leaf.
Wait, so it's not just addition? It's not 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. If I learn to chop an onion, and I learn to mince garlic, and I learn to dice carrots, I don't just have 3 isolated skills.
Exactly. It is emergence. The elements combine to create a property that entirely transcends the sum of its parts.
Think about baking a cake. Flour, sugar, and eggs are 3 distinct things. But when you synthesize them with heat, you don't get hot flour, sugar, eggs.
You get a cake. A completely new emergent property.
You practice those 3 highly specific atomic behaviors, the fruits, and suddenly a new functional state of leaves like prep speed emerges in your life.
You integrate 3 leaves, and a branch, like culinary technique, strengthens. You don't build the root from the top down. You painstakingly, daily, cultivate the 36 fruits at the edges, and you let the root spontaneously generate at the center.
It's the ultimate inversion of how we usually tackle our ambitions. We usually stare at the root, the big dream of being a master chef or a CEO or a published author, and we get utterly paralyzed because we don't know how to be that huge, complex thing.
The chart says, stop staring at the root. It's empty right now anyway. Look at the edges. Execute the 36 fruits. Let the synthesis operator do the heavy lifting of emergence.
Just chop the onion, the chef will emerge.
It is an architectural approach to human potential. It breaks the impossible down into the inevitable.
But to truly understand this architecture, and to ensure it doesn't collapse on us, we have to examine those load-bearing walls we mentioned earlier.
Section 4 of our deep dive focuses heavily on level 2. The 4 branches, and the very real danger of what the framework calls silent saboteurs.
Right, because if these branches are built in total isolation from one another, or if they secretly conflict with one another, the whole structure tears itself apart from the inside out.
You might be executing your fruits perfectly, but if the branches are at war, the root dies.
The source material provides an exemplar set of 4 universal branches to illustrate this. They are power, presence, purpose, and proclivity.
It's crucial to note right off the bat that this specific four-branch framework is a map, not a rigid prescription. The listener can, and absolutely should, substitute their own concepts if these four words don't resonate perfectly with what they're trying to build.
You might choose authenticity, innovation, balance, and impact. Or maybe wisdom, courage, love, and action.
But there is a strict rule in the material for determining if a branch you choose is actually valid. It's called the test.
If the removal of any one branch would fundamentally disrupt your life and cause the whole system to collapse, it is a valid load-bearing branch.
If you can remove it and life goes on relatively normally, it is merely decorative. It's just wallpaper. It's a leaf, not a branch.
Assuming we're working with the exemplar set power, presence, purpose, proclivity, we have to look deeply at how they interact. The framework requires mapping what it calls the 24-pair integration matrix.
This means every single branch relates bidirectionally with every other branch. You have to ask, how does my power influence my presence? And conversely, how does my presence influence my power?
That's two distinct relationships just between those two branches. When you map all four against each other bidirectionally, you get 24 intersections.
And when you have fragmented systems, where your branches are working at cross purposes at any of those 24 intersections, you encounter the silent saboteurs.
These are catastrophic failure modes caused by operating one branch in total isolation for the rest of the root square. I want to bring up a vivid example that we can all probably relate to, either because we've seen it or because we've been it.
Let's look at the saboteur of power without presence.
That is a classic, highly destructive failure mode in both corporate and personal environments. Think of the highly ambitious person who walks into every single room at maximum intensity. They are incredibly capable, they have immense force of will, but their calibration is completely missing.
Because their power, their ability to enact change is entirely disconnected from their presence. Their ability to listen, observe, and ground themselves. They can't read the room.
They don't know when to whisper and when to shout. They just bulldoze. The force is real, but it becomes destructive. They alienate everyone around them, and eventually their power isolates them.
Let's expand on another one. What about purpose without power? This is the starving visionary.
Oh, I know a lot of people stuck in that trap.
This is the person who has a brilliant, world-changing idea. They have immense purpose. They know exactly what needs to be done to save the world or revolutionize an industry.
But because they have ignored the branch of power, which the source defines as the backing force, that allows you to actually impact reality and affect universal nodes, they never execute.
They don't build the network. They don't learn the hard skills of negotiation or finance. Good intentions and a noble purpose don't build bridges. Power does. Without power, purpose is just a daydream.
They think wanting something noble is enough. What about proclivity? The text defines proclivity as the architecture of desire.
It is the substrate beneath your goals, the formulative energy that drives what you actually want to do, your natural inclinations.
What happens when proclivity operates without purpose?
That yields the hedonist. You have immense desire, immense energy to pursue what feels good or natural in the moment, but it is untethered to any macroscopic mission.
It is directionless consumption.
Yeah.
You jump from hobby to hobby, relationship to relationship, job to job, following your proclivity, but never building a cohesive narrative because the purpose branch is missing.
So what does this all mean for how we evaluate our own lives? It feels like it's very easy to accidentally cultivate a saboteur.
This raises a vital diagnostic question for the listener. Are your four branches colluding to build your root, or are they secretly fighting a civil war?
If your proclivity, your deep natural desires, is totally misaligned with your purpose's purpose, your outward stated mission, you will experience constant, exhausting friction.
You will feel like you are dragging yourself out of bed every day. If your power is operating blind without presence, you will break things you are trying to build.
True transformation requires ensuring systemic synergy across all 24 bidirectional relationships in that matrix. You have to audit the intersections.
It really emphasizes that you can't just pick your favorite parts of personal development and ignore the rest. You can't say, I'm going to focus 100% on accumulating power and just ignore presence, because sitting still and being present makes me uncomfortable.
Or, I'm going to focus entirely on my purpose and ignore the messy reality of acquiring power. The house will collapse. You need all four load-bearing walls, and they must be tied together.
Which leads us to the final and perhaps most complex revelation of the root square chart. We've looked at the beautiful symmetry of it so far. The 36 fruits, 12 leaves, 4 branches, and 1 root.
The math seems so incredibly clean. Everything divides perfectly by 4. It appeals to our sense of order.
But the sources reveal a hidden, deeply counterintuitive mathematical truth embedded right in the geometry of this chart. The proportions aren't actually what they seem on the surface.
To really understand how the root magically emerges from the parts, we have to dive into Section 5, the fourth quarter principle.
The fourth quarter principle exposes the secret math of emergence. It answers the question of how the synthesis operator actually works.
When you look at the lower levels of the hierarchy, how fruits synthesize to become a leaf, or how leaves synthesize to become a branch, the math is not a simple, clean four-part division like we initially assumed.
It is actually a 3+1 structure.
Okay, let's break this down slowly because it's a bit of a brain bender at first, and it's the crux of the whole system.
Let's look at the fruit to leaf level.
Okay.
We said there are 3 fruits of a leaf.
Yes. A leaf is made of 3 named elements, 3 specific fruits. These 3 fruits account for 75% of the leaf's total functional value.
The text calls this 75% the bound identification. They are the rigid, constructed, definable parts. You can name them, practice them, and measure them.
But obviously, 3 times 25% is only 75%. That leaves 25% missing. The missing 25% is the fourth quarter, which the text defines as the overlap or tailored utilization.
So the fourth quarter isn't a fourth secret fruit that we forgot to name. It's the empty space where the 3 fruits interact.
It is how the 3 rigid elements are used together dynamically in real time. It's the fluid application of the skill.
Exactly. You build 75% structure, and you deliberately leave 25% open for the living, breathing application of that structure.
Let's bring this to life with an analogy, because the abstraction can be tough. Think of a professional basketball player.
Let's use the athlete analogy, yes. The source material leans heavily into this.
Right. Think about building the skills of a basketball player. 75% of their skill at a certain level is rigid structure. It's muscle memory.
It's the fruits. Dribbling with the left hand, shooting a free throw, running a specific defensive route.
That's the bound identification. They practice that in an empty gym until it's automatic. But if a player is 100% rigid structure, they act like a programmed robot on the court.
They will lose the game because the game is dynamic. They need the empty space.
Yes. The remaining 25%, the tailored utilization, is the empty space. That's the player reading the defense in real time, deciding when to pass, when to break the set play because a lane opened up.
It is the spontaneous application of the 75% structure. You need that 25% empty space for adaptation.
That 3+1 pattern holds true as fruits synthesize into leaves and as leaves synthesize into branches. There is always a gap left for the human element, the real-time application.
And this is the crucial pivot where the architecture shifts entirely at the highest level. Where branches synthesize into the root, the pattern completely changes.
Right. This is the mind-blowing part. At the final branch to root level, it is not a 3+1 structure anymore. There are 4 distinct, fully formed branches, and each one accounts for exactly 25% of the root.
4 times 25 is 100%. There's no missing quarter. There's no empty space left over.
They are not subcomponents in the same way fruits are to leaves. The 4 branches are what the text calls equivocal perspectives. They are 4 entirely different, 100% complete dimensional lenses viewing the exact same central scenario.
For example, if we look at a generic action, the time branch asks about temporal sequence. When does this happen? The energy branch asks about resource cost. What does this cost?
The output branch asks about value created. What does this produce? The divergence branch asks about opportunity cost. Which futures are opened or closed by this action?
They are 4 distinct identities, looking at the exact same center point. Returning to the athlete analogy, the source material breaks this down into circumstance A and circumstance B.
I have found this incredibly helpful to visualize the difference between the lower levels and the top level. Let's walk through that.
Okay, circumstance A is all about the grueling practice. It's the empty gym. It's developing the fruits and the leaves.
It's the drills, the weightlifting, the endless repetition that turns a random person into a highly capable athlete.
In circumstance A, you are heavily relying on that 3+1 structure. You are building those branches, utilizing that 75% rigid structure, and practicing the 25% overlap at the micro level. You are building the capacity to play.
And circumstance B.
Circumstance B is game day. It is stepping onto the court for the championship game with thousands of people watching.
It is putting those 4 fully formed, 100% realized branches, your physical conditioning, your tactical knowledge, your emotional regulation, and your teamwork into proper proximity around the exact same central scenario, the game itself.
But here was my genuine pushback when I first read this part of the architecture. If these 4 branches are totally distinct, rigid identities at 25% each, taking up 100% of the space, how does the root actually form without us forcing it?
What glues them together if there is no overlap quarter at the top level to act as the connective tissue?
That is the ultimate magic of the fourth quarter principle applied systemically. At the lower levels, you absolutely needed that 25% tailored utilization, the empty space, to make the parts work together.
But at the top level, something profound happens. When you take 4 fully realized complete branches, meaning you have done the work in circumstance A, and you aim them at the exact same high-stakes scenario in circumstance B, they exert a massive gravitational pull on one another.
They literally coerce each other into collaboration. They're forced to work together by the sheer proximity and pressure of this scenario.
Exactly. The root is that spontaneous collaboration. It doesn't need an extra 25% of empty space to figure out how to operate because the architecture for play is already fully present, fully matured in the branches.
From each branch comes 25% equivalency to the root in a bound identity. 25% times 4 equals 100%.
When those 4 pillars are put into proper proximity around a central purpose, the root expresses itself without any external coercion. It just happens. The game plays itself through the athlete.
It's like a symphony. It's like bringing 4 world-class musicians into a room, say a cellist, a violinist, and a bassist.
Each is a master of their own instrument. They are 4 distinct, 100% realized branches.
You put them in a room with a piece of music, the scenario, and you just say, play. You don't need a 5th person to act as the empty space to glue the sound together.
You don't need to force the music to sound good. The symphony, the root, just emerges naturally from the friction and collaboration of their proximity.
It's breathtaking when you finally step back and see how the math layers together to create actual lived human experience.
It truly is. We have traveled a vast, complex architectural landscape today. We started by fundamentally redefining our destinations, learning why cultivating the daily practice of orientation is vastly superior and infinitely more effective than obsessing over static goals.
We moved from wishing for a destination to steering the ship.
We looked at the integrated equation, taking those vague, shameful feelings of failure and turning them into a debuggable mathematical formula. Orientation times consistency divided by resistance.
We learned to troubleshoot our environment and our internal friction instead of blaming our character.
We mapped the cellular biology of our transformation using the root square chart. We understood how 36 atomic actionable fruits synthesize into 12 functional leaves, which build the 4 load-bearing branches, ultimately allowing the one emergent root to spontaneously generate.
We confronted the terrifying reality of the silent saboteurs. We realized that our branches like power and presence, purpose, and proclivity must be integrated across that 24-pair matrix. Otherwise, they act as wrecking balls, tearing our house down from the inside.
And finally, we uncovered the secret glue of the fourth quarter principle, seeing how 75% construction plus 25% dynamic overlap at the atomic level eventually builds 4 distinct pillars that coerce the ultimate root into existence.
If there is one overarching theme to distill from all these sources, one paradigm shift to take away, it is this. You are not a broken object in need of repair. You do not need a quick fix.
You are an architect running a highly dynamic, interconnected system, and through this framework, you now possess the blueprint to evaluate that system. The power of this metamatics approach is that it gives you a precise, objective language to see, map, and design your reality.
You hold the blueprint. You aren't just a user anymore. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your week.
Think about the empty space we discussed in your own root square, that 25% overlap at the atomic fruit level, the tailored utilization.
The sources tell us something incredibly poetic about this math. The empty space between your carefully practiced skills isn't actually empty at all. It is where construction becomes expression. It is the gap where you actually live.
The rigid structure is just the scaffolding. The 75% just holds the building up so you can experience the 25%.
Exactly. The structure exists to facilitate the art of living. So as you step away from this deep dive, ask yourself a hard question. Are you just hoarding isolated fruits of knowledge? Are you just collecting skills, reading books, listening to deep dives, and building rigid structures without ever actually applying them dynamically?
Or are you actively inhabiting the overlap? Are you stepping into that empty 25% of tailored utilization, taking the risk of playing the game and letting your true root emerge?
Because knowledge and structure is only truly valuable when it is understood and applied in that fluid space of reality. Remember how we started this conversation? That feeling of achieving a massive goal, standing at the top of the mountain and feeling totally empty.
That emptiness happens when you spend your whole life building the rigid structure, but you forget to inhabit the overlap.
Don't just obsessively build the house. Remember to live in it. The remote is in your hand, the structural mechanics are laid bare, and the source code of your becoming is wide open. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.